The transport ship landed on Station Helix 7 with a loud hiss of steam and pressure release. The massive doors opened slowly, and bright white light flooded into the cargo hold where the new recruits waited. Morgan stood near the back of the group, her small bag hanging from her shoulder. She watched as aliens of all shapes and sizes walked down the ramp and into the station. Was 17 years old. She had brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail and quiet brown eyes that watched everything carefully. Her skin was tanned from years of working outside under the harsh sun of Earth. She stood only 5'4" tall, which made her shorter than almost every other recruit on the ship. The station was enormous. Metal walls stretched upward for hundreds of feet, and floating platforms carried soldiers and equipment across the open space. Holographic signs pointed toward different sections of the facility. The air smelled clean but artificial, nothing like the rich smell of dirt and grass that knew from home. A tall, blue-skinned female walked past and looked down at her with something like pity in her large silver eyes. There were beautiful creatures, with smooth skin and graceful movements. They stood nearly 7 feet tall and considered themselves one of the most advanced species in the Galactic Federation. "A human," they said to her companion, another male. "I did not know they were accepting primitives into the academy now." Said nothing. She simply kept walking toward the registration area. The Galactic Federation had existed for thousands of years. Hundreds of species had joined together to explore the galaxy, trade goods, and protect each other from threats. Earth had only made contact with the Federation 12 years ago, when an exploration vessel had discovered the small blue planet on the edge of known space. The Federation had been shocked by what they found on Earth. Most habitable planets in the galaxy were peaceful places. The weather was calm, the animals were gentle, and the environment supported life without trying to destroy it. Earth was different. Earth was classified as a Category 12 death world, one of the most dangerous planets ever discovered. On Earth, massive storms could destroy entire cities. The ground itself could shake and split open without warning. Volcanoes poured fire from the mountains. The oceans were filled with creatures that could swallow ships whole. Even the smallest animals could carry poisons that could kill in minutes. The plants could be toxic. The water could be contaminated. The very air changed from place to place. And yet humans had not only survived on this nightmare planet. They had thrived. They had built civilizations, created technology, and eventually reached for the stars. The Federation scientists could not understand it. How could such soft, small creatures survive on a world that seemed designed to kill everything on it? Reached the registration desk where a bored-looking four-armed creature sat behind a computer terminal. The creature had gray skin and small black eyes that barely looked up as approached. "Name and planet of origin," the creature said in a flat voice. "Morgan, Earth." The creature's eyes widened slightly and it looked at with new interest. "Earth, the death world." "That is what you call it," said calmly. "We just call it home." The creature made a strange sound that might have been a laugh. "You are assigned to Training Group 7. Report to Hall 14 for orientation. Good luck, human. You will need it." Took her assignment card and walked in the direction the signs indicated. Other recruits moved around her, most of them towering over her small frame. She saw tall insect-like creatures with hard shells and compound eyes. She saw massive bear-like beings covered in thick fur. She saw reptilian warriors with scales and tails and 4 powerful arms. All of them looked at her with confusion or amusement. A few laughed openly. Hall 14 was a large training facility with high ceilings and metal floors. About 60 recruits had gathered inside, standing in loose groups based on their species. Found an empty spot near the wall and waited quietly. The doors at the far end of the hall slammed open, and every recruit immediately fell silent. Drill instructor Ran walked into the room. He was but larger than any had seen before. He stood over 8 feet tall, with dark green scales that gleamed under the lights. His forearms were thick with muscle, and his claws looked sharp enough to cut through metal. His tail swung behind him like a weapon, but it was his eyes that caught attention. They were bright yellow, and they burned with an intensity that made several recruits step backward. Rand walked slowly through the room, examining each recruit as he passed. His heavy footsteps echoed off the walls. No one dared to speak or even breathe too loudly. "I am Drill Instructor Rand," he announced, his deep voice rumbling through the hall. "For the next 12 months I own you. Your bodies belong to me. Your time belongs to me. Your pain belongs to me. I will break you down into nothing, and then I will build you back up into soldiers worthy of the Galactic Federation." He stopped in front of a large male who stood nearly as tall as he did. Rand looked him up and down with approval. "You," he said, "what is your name?" "Sir." "Good, strong species. You will be placed in advanced combat training." Rand moved on, selecting several more recruits for special attention. He pointed at A with unusually long arms and added her to the combat group. He chose 2 males who moved with natural grace. Then his yellow eyes found. He walked toward her slowly, his tail scraping against the floor. The other recruits moved aside to give him room, stood perfectly still and looked up at the massive without showing any fear. Rand stared down at her for a long moment. Then he made a sound of disgust. "A human," he said loudly so everyone could hear. "A human female. The smallest, weakest species in the Federation sends me a child to train." Laughter rippled through the room, remained silent. Rand leaned down until his face was close to hers. His breath was hot and smelled like meat. "Tell me, little human, do you actually believe you belong here? Do you think you can fight beside real warriors?" Met his gaze without blinking. "I am here to learn, sir." More laughter. Rand straightened up and shook his head. "There is nothing I can teach something like you," he said dismissively. "You will be assigned to support duties. Cleaning, cooking, inventory. Stay out of the way of real soldiers, and perhaps you will survive the year." He turned his back on her and walked away, already forgetting she existed. Watched him go. Her expression did not change, but deep inside, a small flame of determination burned brighter than before. She had been underestimated her entire life. On Earth, she had been considered too small, too quiet, too unremarkable. But Earth had taught her something that these aliens would never understand from their safe, gentle worlds. It was not size that made a survivor. It was not strength or speed or natural weapons. It was the will to endure, the refusal to give up, the ability to adapt and overcome. Morgan had been born on a death world. She had grown up fighting for every breath, every meal, every moment of safety. The galaxy thought humans were weak because they were small and soft. They had no idea what they were looking at. 3 weeks passed on Station Helix 7, and Morgan became invisible. Every morning, the combat recruits would gather in Hall 14 for training. Rand would push them through brutal exercises, teaching them fighting techniques, weapons handling, and tactical movement. Was never included. Instead, she was sent to the supply rooms to count boxes, to the kitchens to prepare meals, and to the equipment lockers to clean and repair training gear. The other recruits forgot she existed. When they talked about their training, their victories, and their failures, no one ever mentioned the small human girl who mopped the floors after they left. She was simply part of the background, as unimportant as the lights on the ceiling or the humming of the ventilation systems. But did not waste her time. She woke up 2 hours before everyone else, when the station was still quiet and dark. She would slip out of her small room in the support staff quarters and make her way to the outer ring of the station. This section was designed to simulate high-gravity conditions, nearly twice the standard level. It was used to train species from low-gravity worlds to adapt to harsher environments. Ran laps around the outer ring every morning. The heavy gravity pulled at her body, making every step feel like she was carrying another person on her back. Her muscles burned. Her lungs ached. Sweat poured down her face and soaked through her clothes. But she kept running. After her run, she would find an empty training room and practice the fighting techniques she had learned on Earth. She moved through forms that had been developed over thousands of years by human warriors. Strikes, blocks, throws, and holds that did not rely on size or strength but on precision, timing, and knowledge of anatomy. On Earth, humans had learned to fight because they had no choice. They did not have claws or fangs or thick armor. They could not run faster than their predators or overpower them with raw strength. So they learned to use tools, to work together, and to strike at weak points that their enemies did not even know they had. Practiced in silence, her movements smooth and controlled. She imagined opponents attacking her from all directions, and she responded with techniques designed to disable creatures much larger than herself. She was not just exercising, she was preparing. One night, after a long day of cleaning training equipment, found a quiet corner of the cargo bay to practice. The bay was usually empty during rest cycles, with only the distant hum of the station's engines for company. She had been working on a particularly difficult throw technique when she heard a clicking sound behind her. Spun around, her hands raised in a defensive position. Stood in the shadows, watching her with large compound eyes that reflected the dim light. He was smaller than most of his species, with a thin shell that looked fragile compared to the other recruits. Recognized him from the first day. He had also been assigned to support duties after Rand dismissed him as too weak for combat training. "I did not mean to startle you," the said, his voice a soft series of clicks and whistles that the translation device in his ear converted to words. "My name is Al. I have seen you here before, practicing alone." Lowered her hands but remained alert. "You have been watching me." Al made a gesture with his front limbs that suggested embarrassment. "Not watching exactly. I come here to be alone, away from the others who mock me. I noticed you do the same thing." He tilted his head curiously. "What are you doing? Those movements, they look like fighting techniques, but I do not recognize the style." Considered whether to trust him. She had learned on Earth that trust was something you gave carefully, because it could be taken advantage of so easily. But there was something in Al's voice, a loneliness that she recognized in herself. "They are techniques from Mai," she said finally. "Humans developed many different fighting styles over thousands of years. We call them martial arts." Al's eyes widened with interest. "Your species developed fighting techniques, but I was told humans are one of the weakest species in the Federation. No natural weapons, thin skin, limited strength." Smiled slightly. "That is exactly why we developed these techniques. When you cannot win with raw power, you learn to fight smarter. You learn to use your enemy's strength against them. You learn to find weaknesses and exploit them." She demonstrated a simple throw, grabbing an imaginary opponent's arm and using their own momentum to send them crashing to the ground. Al watched with growing fascination. "On R, we do not have such things," he admitted. "Our warriors rely on their natural armor and sharp limbs. Speed and protection are valued above technique. Those of us born with thin shells are considered worthless for combat." "Rand thinks I am worthless too," said. "He did not even bother to test me. He saw a small human and made his decision in 1 second. Al clicked sadly. The instructor sees only what he wants to see. He believes strength is the only thing that matters. He has never been proven wrong, so he never questions his beliefs. Resumed her practice, moving through a series of strikes aimed at precise points in the air. On Earth, we have a saying: the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Large opponents have more weight to work against them when they lose their balance. They have more distance to fall and more force when they hit the ground. She paused and looked at Al seriously. The instructor has trained warriors for 40 years. He has won many battles and killed many enemies. He thinks he knows everything about combat, but he has never fought a human before. He does not know what we are capable of. Al was quiet for a moment. Are you planning something, Morgan? Did not answer directly. She simply continued her practice, her movements becoming faster and more fluid. I am preparing, she said finally. Opportunities do not always announce themselves. When one appears, I intend to be ready. The two of them began meeting regularly after that. Al would watch practice and ask questions about human history and culture. He was amazed to learn about Earth's violent past, the wars and conflicts that had shaped human civilization. He could not believe that a species could survive so much internal fighting and still advance technologically. Your species fought wars against each other, he asked one night, horrified, while also surviving the natural dangers of your world. Nodded. We fought over land, resources, beliefs, and power. Millions died in these conflicts, but we also learned. Each war taught us something new about fighting, about strategy, about the limits of what bodies can endure. She showed him images on her personal data device, historical pictures of human soldiers from different eras, men in armor with swords, soldiers with rifles in trenches, modern fighters with advanced weapons and technology, the progression of human warfare across thousands of years. Al stared at the images with a mix of horror and respect. Your species is not weak at all, he said quietly. You are the most dangerous thing I have ever heard of. You just do not look like it. Put the device away and smiled. That is what makes us dangerous, Al. Everyone expects threats to look like threats. Large teeth, sharp claws, big muscles. Humans look harmless. By the time our enemies realize their mistake, it is already too late. In the distance, they could hear Rand's voice echoing through the halls, berating some recruit who had failed to meet his standards. His roar of anger made the walls vibrate. Listened to the sound of his rage, and felt nothing but calm patience. Her time would come, she just had to wait for the right moment. And when it came, drill instructor Rand would learn why the galaxy called Earth a death world. The monthly combat exhibition was the most important event at the academy. Recruits from all training groups would gather in the main arena to demonstrate their progress. High-ranking officers from across the Federation would come to observe and identify promising candidates for special assignments. Careers were made or destroyed based on performance in these exhibitions. Stood at the edge of the crowd, wearing her plain support staff uniform while the combat recruits wore their official training gear. She had been assigned to help with refreshments for the visiting officers, carrying trays of drinks and small foods around the observation platform. No one looked at her twice. She was just another servant, invisible and unimportant. Admiral N sat in the center of the observation platform, her silver eyes watching the arena below with keen interest. She was one of the most decorated officers in the Federation, a female who had commanded fleets in 3 major wars and negotiated peace treaties with a dozen hostile species. Her presence at this exhibition was unusual. Normally, she only attended final graduation ceremonies. Rumors spread through the crowd that the Admiral was looking for something specific, some talent or ability that the regular training programs were not producing. Filed this information away in her mind as she moved through the officers, offering drinks with a polite smile. In the arena below, Rand stood at the center of the fighting ring, his scales gleaming under the bright lights. He had spent weeks preparing his best students for this moment. The exhibition was his chance to show the Federation that his training methods produced the finest warriors in the galaxy. Today, you will witness the results of proper military training, Rand announced, his voice amplified throughout the arena. My recruits have been forged in fire and discipline. They are no longer the soft creatures who arrived here months ago. They are weapons. The first demonstration began. 2 males faced each other in the ring, their massive bodies colliding with enough force to shake the floor. They grappled and struck, using the techniques Rand had taught them. The crowd cheered as one finally threw the other to the ground and claimed victory. More demonstrations followed. Warriors showed their speed and precision. Recruits displayed their graceful combat styles. A male fought 3 opponents at once, using all 4 arms to devastating effect. Rand watched with obvious pride. He walked among his students, praising their victories and offering correction for their mistakes. Every movement he made was designed to remind everyone watching that he was the master, the creator of these warriors. After an hour of demonstrations, Rand decided to end the exhibition with a personal display. He stepped into the center of the ring and spread all 4 arms wide. "I will now demonstrate the ultimate level of combat skill," he announced. 3 of my best recruits will attack me simultaneously. This is the standard that I demand from my warriors. 3 large recruits entered the ring, They circled Rand carefully, looking for openings. Then, at some unseen signal, all 3 attacked at once. What followed was a brutal lesson in dominance. Rand moved with speed that seemed impossible for his size. He blocked, struck, and countered with practiced efficiency. In less than a minute, all 3 recruits lay on the ground, defeated but not seriously injured. The crowd erupted in applause. Rand basked in the admiration, raising his arms in triumph. "This is power," he declared. "This is what 40 years of combat training looks like. There is no substitute for strength, no shortcut to victory. Only the strong survive in this galaxy." Up on the observation platform, Admiral N watched with an expression that was difficult to read. She did not applaud with the others. Instead, her silver eyes seemed to be searching for something in the arena below. Had finished her serving duties and stood near the back of the platform, watching the demonstration. She saw Rand's display and recognized it for what it was, a show of power meant to intimidate and impress. The recruits he had defeated had attacked in predictable patterns, using only the techniques he had taught them. They had no creativity, no ability to adapt. Rand was scanning the crowd now, enjoying the attention. His yellow eyes passed over the faces of officers, recruits, and support staff. Then they stopped on. Something in his expression changed. Perhaps he saw her watching him without the fear or admiration that everyone else showed. Perhaps he simply wanted to remind everyone of his authority over even the lowest member of the academy. Whatever the reason, he pointed directly at her. "You," he called out, his voice echoing through the arena. "The human, come down here." Every eye in the arena turned to. She felt the weight of their stares, the confusion, amusement, and curiosity. Slowly, she set down the empty tray she was carrying and walked toward the stairs that led down to the arena floor. The walk seemed to take forever. With each step, she heard whispers from the crowd. What was he doing? Why was he calling for the human? Was this some kind of joke? Reached the arena floor and walked toward the fighting ring. Rand waited for her with his arms crossed, a cruel smile spreading across his scaled face. "Ladies and," he announced mockingly, "I present to you the pride of humanity. This small creature was sent to my academy to become a warrior. Can you believe it?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, said nothing. She simply stepped into the ring and faced Rand directly. "I thought perhaps you would like to demonstrate what your species can do," Rand continued. "Surely in 3 weeks you have learned something useful. Perhaps you could show Admiral N why humans deserve a place in the Federation military." More laughter. On the observation platform, Admiral N leaned forward slightly, her silver eyes fixed on the small human girl in the ring. Remained silent for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice calm and clear. "You want me to fight, instructor?" Rand made a show of looking surprised. "Fight? You? Against who? One of the children, perhaps. Even that might be too much for you." "Against you." The laughter stopped immediately. A stunned silence fell over the arena. Rand's smile faded, replaced by a look of confusion. "What did you say?" Repeated herself, her voice steady. I challenge you, drill instructor Ran, one-on-one, in front of everyone here. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Ran began to laugh, a deep rumbling sound that echoed off the walls. Other aliens joined in, though their laughter sounded nervous now. You challenge me, Ran said when he finally stopped laughing. A creature I could crush with one hand challenges me to combat. This is the funniest thing I have heard in decades. He stepped closer to, looming over her small form. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, but she did not step backward. She did not blink. Little human, Rand said, his voice dropping to a growl. I have killed enemies twice your size with my bare claws. I have fought in 12 planetary campaigns. I have never been defeated in personal combat. Are you sure you want to do this? Nodded once, I am sure. Rand stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked up at Admiral N, who was watching with intense interest. Very well, he said finally. If the human wishes to be humiliated in front of the entire academy, I will grant her wish. But do not blame me when she ends up in the medical bay. He stepped back and raised his forearms, dropping into a combat stance. His tail swayed behind him, ready to strike. His claws extended, sharp and gleaming. Removed her jacket and tossed it aside. Underneath, she wore a simple training shirt that showed her lean, muscled arms. She rolled her shoulders, cracked her neck, and settled into a stance that none of the aliens had ever seen before. In the crowd, Al watched with his mandibles clicking nervously. He had seen practice, but this was different. This was real. The signal master looked to Admiral N for permission to begin. The Admiral nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the small human in the ring. The signal sounded. The fight had begun. The moment the signal sounded, Ran attacked. He launched himself forward with explosive speed, covering the distance between them in a single heartbeat. His upper right arm swept towards head in a devastating strike that had shattered the bones of species far larger and tougher than humans. The power behind it could have cracked stone. Was not there. She had already moved, slipping to the side with a fluid motion that seemed almost casual. Rand's massive fist passed through empty air where her head had been a fraction of a second before. Before he could recover, struck. Her palm shot forward and connected with the joint of his lower left elbow. It was a precise blow, aimed at the small gap in his scales where the nerves clustered together. The arm went completely numb, hanging uselessly at his side. Rand roared in surprise and spun around, his tail sweeping low to catch her legs. Jumped, tucking her knees to her chest as the tail passed beneath her. She landed lightly and immediately moved behind him, staying in his blind spot. The crowd watched in stunned silence. No one could believe what they were seeing. Rand turned to face her, his yellow eyes burning with anger. He was not laughing anymore. His 3 functioning arms reached for her, claws extended to tear and rend. Ducked under his grasp and drove her foot into the back of his knee. It was a human joint lock technique, designed to exploit the mechanical weakness in how bipedal creatures stood. Even though legs were structured differently than human legs, the principle was the same. Apply enough force at the right angle and the leg would buckle. Rand stumbled, dropping to one knee. Used this moment to deliver 3 rapid strikes to the nerve clusters along his spine. She had studied anatomy during her lonely nights in the cargo bay, learning where their bodies were strong and where they were vulnerable. Every species had weak points. Most just did not know how to exploit them. Pain shot through Rand's back, and his muscles seized momentarily. He snarled and threw himself backward, trying to crush the human with his massive body. Rolled aside and was back on her feet before he could rise. How? Rand demanded, struggling to stand. His left arm was still numb and his back throbbed with pain. How is this possible? Circled him slowly, her breathing calm and controlled. On my world, she said, humans develop something called martial arts. It is the science of combat. Not fighting with strength against strength, but using knowledge of the body to defeat any opponent, regardless of size. She moved closer, her hands raised in a guard position that protected her head and torso. Your species evolved as predators. You rely on power and speed because those traits always worked for you. You never needed to develop sophisticated fighting techniques because you were always the strongest thing in any fight. Rand lunged at her again, all three working arms reaching to grab her. Caught one of his wrists and used his own momentum against him. She pivoted her body, pulling him forward while sweeping his legs. The massive flew through the air and crashed onto his back with enough force to shake the arena floor. Before he could rise, was on him. She locked his primary arm against her body and pressed her forearm against his throat. Her legs wrapped around his torso, pinning him in place. It was a chokehold, a technique that humans had used against each other for thousands of years. Rand thrashed and struggled, but he could not break free. His grip was not based on strength. It was based on leverage and positioning. The more he struggled, the hold became. "This is what a death world teaches you," said, her voice still calm despite the physical effort. "When everything is trying to kill you, you learn to fight smart. You learn that the biggest enemy has the farthest to fall. You learn that every creature, no matter how powerful, has weaknesses." Rand's movements became weaker as the blood flow to his brain was restricted. His scales began to change color, a sign of oxygen deprivation in his species. His eyes, which had burned with fury moments ago, now showed something else. Fear. In 40 years of combat, Rand had never felt fear. He had faced enemies who could crush tanks, who could spit acid, who could move faster than the eye could follow. He had defeated them all. And now a small human female, someone he had dismissed without a second thought, had him completely helpless. "Yield," said calmly. "I have no desire to kill you, instructor, but I will not release this hold until you surrender." For a long moment, Rand continued to struggle. His pride screamed at him to fight, to never give up, to die before admitting defeat. But his survival instincts were stronger. He could feel consciousness slipping away, and he knew that if he did not yield now, he might never wake up. Slowly, reluctantly, his tail tapped the floor 3 times, the universal signal of surrender. Released the hold immediately and stepped back, giving him room to breathe. She stood over his prone form, not gloating or celebrating, just waiting calmly for him to recover. The arena was absolutely silent. Thousands of aliens stared at the impossible scene before them. The great drill instructor Rand, undefeated champion of 12 planetary campaigns, lay on the ground, defeated by a creature half his size. Then Admiral N began to clap. The sound echoed through the silent arena, slow and deliberate. One by one, other officers joined in. Then the recruits, then even the support staff. The applause grew until it filled the entire space, a thundering recognition of what they had just witnessed. Rand slowly pushed himself to his feet. His left arm was starting to regain feeling, sending painful pins and needles through his muscles. His back ached, his throat was sore, and his pride was in ruins. But as he looked down at the small human who had defeated him, he felt something unexpected. Respect. Not the grudging acknowledgement of a lucky victory, but genuine respect for a warrior who had outfought him completely. She had studied him, understood his weaknesses, and exploited them with precision and skill. That was not luck. That was mastery. Looked up at him with those quiet brown eyes. There was no triumph in her expression, no mockery or satisfaction. She simply waited for what would come next. "Human," Rand said, his voice rough from the chokehold. "What is your name?" "Morgan, Earth, North American continent." Rand nodded slowly. He turned to face the crowd, his massive body still showing signs of the battle, one arm hanging limply, his movements stiff with pain. "I have trained warriors for 40 years, he announced, his voice carrying through the arena. "I believed I understood combat. I believed I knew everything worth knowing about fighting. He paused and looked back at. I was wrong. A murmur ran through the crowd. No one had ever heard Rand admit to being wrong about anything. This human, he continued, has shown me that strength is not the only path to victory, that size and power can be defeated by knowledge and skill, that the species I dismissed as weak are anything but. He turned fully to face and did something that shocked everyone watching. He bowed. A warrior bowing to a defeated opponent was unheard of. For the great Rand to bow to a human, a creature he had mocked and dismissed, was beyond imagination. But he held the bow for a long moment, showing respect in the deepest way his culture allowed. When he straightened, his yellow eyes met brown ones. I underestimated you, Morgan of Earth, he said. I underestimated your entire species. That was my failure, not yours, and I will not make that mistake again. In the crowd, Al was clicking so rapidly that the aliens around him looked concerned. He could barely contain his excitement. His friend, the invisible human who had been ignored and dismissed, had just done the impossible. She had humiliated the instructor. And she had done it without arrogance, without cruelty, without any of the negative qualities that the other species associated with power. She had simply proven a point and then waited patiently for recognition. That, Al realized, was perhaps the most human thing of all. Admiral N descended from the observation platform with graceful steps that made no sound on the metal floor. The crowd parted before her like water before a ship, recruits and officers alike bowing their heads in respect. She walked directly to the fighting ring where Rand still stood. Up close, the Admiral was even more impressive. Her silver eyes held centuries of wisdom and experience. Her blue skin was marked with the subtle scars of old battles, badges of honor among the. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. Instructor Rand, she said, her voice musical but firm. I believe you owe this recruit more than an apology. She has earned a place in combat training, has she not? Rand straightened, his injured arm still hanging at his side. She has, Admiral, more than earned it. Admiral N turned her attention to, studying her with those penetrating silver eyes. Morgan of Earth, I came to this exhibition looking for something specific. I did not expect to find it in someone wearing a support staff uniform. Remained still, unsure how to respond. I was not given the opportunity to train properly, Admiral. And yet you trained anyway. It was not a question. You prepared in secret, studied your opponent, and waited for the right moment to demonstrate your abilities. That shows patience, intelligence, and determination, all qualities I value highly. She turned to address the entire arena, raising her voice so everyone could hear. What we have witnessed today is more than a simple sparring match. It is a lesson that every soldier in the Federation should learn. We have become too comfortable with our assumptions. We look at a species, and we think we know what they are capable of. We dismiss those who do not fit our expectations of what a warrior should look like. She gestured toward. This young woman comes from a world we call a death world. We gave it that name because we could not believe anything could survive there. The gravity is crushing, the weather is violent, the predators are deadly, the diseases are countless. Every day on Earth is a fight for survival. Admiral N paused, letting her words sink in. And yet humans have not just survived. They have built civilizations that span their entire planet. They have created art, music, literature, and science. They have developed technologies from simple stone tools to vessels that travel between stars, all while fighting against a world that tried to kill them every single day. She looked directly at Now, and there was something like admiration in her expression. What makes humans dangerous is not their size or their strength. It is their refusal to give up, their ability to adapt to any challenge, their determination to survive no matter what stands in their way. These qualities were forged by their death world, and they carry them everywhere they go. The arena remained silent, absorbing the Admiral's words. "I came here today because the Federation faces new threats," she continued. "Enemies who are larger, stronger, and more advanced than anything we have faced before. Our traditional methods of warfare may not be enough. We need warriors who can think differently, who can find victory where others see only defeat." She extended her hand toward Morgan. "I am offering you a position on my personal command staff. You will train with the best fighters in the Federation, learn from masters of every combat style, and develop your abilities to their fullest potential. In return, I expect you to help us understand how humans think, how they fight, and how they survive." Looked at the extended hand for a long moment. Then she shook her head slightly. "With respect, Admiral, I must decline." A shocked murmur ran through the crowd. Declining an offer from Admiral N was almost unheard of. The commander raised an eyebrow but did not seem offended. "May I ask why?" Turned to look at Ran, then at the other recruits still standing around the arena. "I came here to prove that humans deserve a place in the Federation military. Not just me, but all of us. If I leave now to join your staff, I will become special, unique, an exception that proves the rule. Other humans who come after me will face the same dismissal that I faced." She stepped forward and addressed not just the Admiral, but everyone watching. "My people have a saying, rising tides lift all boats. I do not want to be the only human who succeeds here. I want to change how the Federation sees my entire species. And I can do that better by staying here, by training alongside other recruits, by showing every day that humans are not weak." She turned back to the Admiral. "I am grateful for your offer, truly, but my place is here, at least for now. Let me finish my training properly. Let me prove that what I did today was not a fluke, but the result of what any human can become." Admiral N studied her for a long moment. Then slowly she smiled. "You are exactly what I thought you would be," she said. "Stubborn, principled, and impossible to move once you have made a decision. Very well, Morgan. Stay here and complete your training. But know that my offer remains open. When you are ready, there will be a place for you on my staff." She turned to Ran. "Instructor, I trust you will give Recruit Morgan the training she deserves from this point forward." Ran nodded, his expression serious. "I will, Admiral, and I would ask." He paused, seeming uncomfortable with what he was about to say. "I would ask that Recruit Morgan assist me in training the other recruits. There is clearly much about combat that I do not understand. I would like to learn." Felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. This was not the arrogant bully who had dismissed her on the first day. This was a warrior who had faced defeat with honor and was willing to grow from the experience. "I would be honored to help," she said. Admiral N nodded with satisfaction. "Then it is settled. I look forward to seeing your progress, Recruit Morgan, and I look forward to seeing how this academy changes under your influence." She turned and walked away, her officers falling into step behind her. The crowd began to disperse, but the atmosphere had changed completely. People looked at differently now, not with pity or amusement, but with curiosity and respect. Al pushed through the crowd to reach her, his compound eyes bright with excitement. "You were amazing," he clicked rapidly. "I knew you had been preparing, but I never imagined anything like that. You defeated him so easily." Shook her head. "It was not easy. He is a skilled fighter, and if he had known what I was capable of, he could have adapted his strategy. I won because he underestimated me, because he used the same techniques he always uses without thinking about whether they would work against a different kind of opponent." She looked around at the recruits who were still watching her. "That is the lesson here. Never assume you know everything about your enemy. Never let your past successes make you blind to new challenges. Always be willing to learn and adapt." Ran approached them, his arm finally starting to function normally again. He looked down with an expression that was still adjusting to respect rather than contempt. "Human," he said, then corrected himself. "How did you know about the nerve clusters in anatomy? That information is not commonly available to other species." Smiled slightly. "I asked the medical staff on the station. They have files on every species in the Federation, including anatomical charts. When you dismissed me from combat training, I had a lot of free time. I spent it learning about the weaknesses of every species I might have to fight someday. Every creature has vulnerable points." Rand stared at her for a long moment. Then he made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You spent 3 weeks preparing to fight me specifically." "I spent 3 weeks preparing to fight anyone who underestimated me. You just happened to be the one who gave me the opportunity." The shook his head slowly. "Humans are terrifying creatures. You look so harmless, and beneath that surface, you are planning the destruction of everyone around you." Laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. "We are not that bad. We just believe in being prepared." She looked out toward the windows that showed the endless stars of space. Somewhere out there was Earth, the blue and green world that the galaxy called a death world. Her home. The place that had shaped her, challenged her, and made her strong. The Federation thought they understood what a death world was. They thought it was just about dangerous animals and violent weather. But they were wrong. A death world did not just create survivors. It created adapters, thinkers, and fighters who would never, ever give up. Morgan was just the beginning. More humans would come to the Federation, would face the same dismissal and disrespect. But now there was a precedent. Now there was proof that humans were not weak. And slowly, one challenge at a time, the galaxy would learn what Earth had always known. Humans were not the prey. They never had been.